Bible bakers. I want to introduce you to a very talented baker, but also a very good friend of mine, Brian Hart Hoffman. He is the editor-in-chief for Bake From Scratch magazine. He's also the founder of the Bake Feed. You've probably seen him here before on Bigger Bolder Baking. He is an incredible baker with such a unique point of view. I wanted him to share with you a recipe that is near and dear to his heart. So he's showing us how to make a browned butter hummingbird coffee cake. Check it out.
Thanks so much, Gemma, and thanks for sending Kevin my way. We are having a blast here in my hometown of Birmingham, Alabama, in the kitchen baking, but also sharing food that I love from the South with him. Speaking of things that we love here in the South, we love hummingbird cake. Now, the flavors of banana, pineapple, cinnamon, and pecans, what is there not to love? But this recipe originated in Jamaica, and once it became popular here in the South, I imagine that we added the cream cheese frosting that you traditionally find in the layer cake. But I don't stop there. I love hummingbird in any way I can bake it. So today I'm sharing an amazing recipe with you for a brown butter hummingbird coffee cake. This is your excuse to eat cake for breakfast, lunch, dinner, dessert, or any time of the day you want it. The recipe can be found at biggerbolderbaking.com. And you're gonna love how easy it is to make. I can't wait to show you. To start things off, I made a browned butter. And that's something that you need to do in advance so that it can cool to room temperature before you start with the recipe. And I'll talk about the flavor and the process when we get to it, but just make sure you've done that in advance before you get everything else underway. Then I'm gonna make my streusel. So I know you're thinking, why make the topping first? But I need it to be prepared so when I'm assembling the cake, it's already done. So we'll start with a medium-sized bowl, and I have all-purpose flour, and to this I'm adding light brown sugar, I'm adding cinnamon, and I'm adding salt. And the first thing I'm gonna do is get these ingredients all the way combined, and this is just a simple mixture. And you might even see some of the clumps of brown sugar, so go ahead and get your hands in there too. It makes it so much easier. Then, after all of these ingredients are combined, I'm gonna add my unsalted butter. And this is nice and soft so that it's easy to combine, and toss it in the flour and cinnamon mixture. And then we're just gonna get it nice and incorporated. So using your hands or a spatula or spoon if you wanted to, but I like to get my streusel made by hand so I get the right consistency. Just toss it together and get everything nice and combined. You'll start to see things clump, and that's what we want for that nice streusel topping to go on top of this coffee cake. With the butter fully incorporated and you see this nice clumpy texture, it's now time to add chopped pecans and get them nice and evenly distributed until we have this perfect consistency of our streusel, and then we'll set it aside and start making our cake. I like to start by preparing my dry ingredients first. So in a bowl, I have all-purpose flour, and to this I'm adding granulated sugar, light brown sugar, kosher salt, cinnamon, and baking powder. And I'm just gonna give these a quick whisk and get everything combined before we start adding things to the stand mixer. This takes just a few seconds to get a nice even consistency. Then over here in the bowl of your stand mixer, we'll start by adding some of our wet ingredients. So we're gonna start with some crushed pineapple that's been drained, 2 eggs, vanilla extract, and a mashed ripe banana. Now let's talk about bananas in this recipe. You want to use a banana that has turned brown, and that is an overripe banana because you get such a nice flavor and sweetness from the banana. If you use a banana that's still green, the flavor can change and the texture in the cake can change. So you wanna make sure you're using that overripe banana. Then just give this a combination with the paddle attachment until it's all combined. Now, I have my brown butter here that I will add in just a minute once everything is already combined, but I wanna talk to you about the flavor that you get from brown butter. You get this nice nutty flavor that is warm, it complements the spices that are in the cake, and I promise if you've never made anything with brown butter and you do this, you'll be hooked. With everything combined, now we'll add the butter. And you can see as it gets to room temperature, it starts to set up again and get a little bit thicker than when it was hot and on the stovetop. With the butter in, We'll get this combined before we start adding our dry ingredients to the mix. See how easy this is, and it comes together so quickly. With your mixer on a low speed, you'll start by gradually adding this flour mixture to the butter mixture. And in the recipe, you'll see that we say until just combined, and I'll show you what that looks like. But we don't want to overmix this cake batter because we want that nice tender crumb. With all of the dry ingredients in, I want to show you what it looks like in the mixing bowl. You can see just a little bit of the flour still remains, and there might be some flour on your paddle as well, so go ahead and scrape that down and the sides and bottom of the bowl. Now, all of this could be done in a bowl using a whisk if you wanted to do this by hand, but I find that the stand mixer makes it so much easier. Then I'll just give this one little final stir to make sure that everything is combined, and then I'm gonna grab the cake pan and we'll get this assembled. Now it's time to assemble our coffee cake. So you'll wanna bring the streusel back in, and you're going to be using an 8-inch round cake pan that you've prepared with the non-stick method that you prefer. I know Gemma loves to use the butter wrapper and a dusting of flour. I use a baking spray with flour, but both are gonna work perfectly in this recipe. We're gonna start by taking half of the cake batter and spreading it into an even layer in the bottom of the pan. And this is a really cool technique because we're gonna get some extra flavor and a hidden pocket of the streusel in the middle of our coffee cake. So after spreading that first bit of batter, you're gonna take 1/3 of your streusel and scatter it over your cake batter. Just a little bit more here so we get that nice crunch and flavor. But for even more flavor, I have a simple cinnamon sugar here, combination of granulated sugar and cinnamon, that I'm just gonna dust over the streusel. It's gonna be a really nice extra pocket of flavor here. So just getting more of the warm spice, and you're gonna love the texture that this creates in the cake. Then we're gonna place the remaining part of our batter over the streusel. And for this, I like to spoon a little bit over without having to spread too much. And so I don't want it to all go into the center right away. So this really helps you get better results. Back when I was in high school, I worked at a bakery and had my very first bite of hummingbird cake. And from then on, I've been hooked. So having it in coffee cake form is really nice and really delicious. After adding the last bit of our cake batter, use an offset spatula just to get a nice even layer before we add the remaining part of our streusel. And this is where you get really nice texture, delicious crunch. The pecans get nice and toasted, and you'll be hooked on this coffee cake like I am. But the sweetness doesn't stop here. After we bake this cake, we're gonna be adding a glaze just to add even more deliciousness and make it a little bit like that hummingbird layer cake. So spread your streusel into a nice even layer, and that's it. Then we will bake our coffee cake in a 350 degree Fahrenheit or 180 degrees Celsius oven until a wooden pick inserted in the center comes out clean. That's about 45 to 50 minutes. But halfway through baking, you may want to cover it with a piece of aluminum foil just to prevent the top from getting too brown. And then you'll see this out of the oven, and I wish you could smell it because it's gonna be amazing. Y'all, it smells so good. After baking, I let the cake cool in the pan for 15 minutes before inverting and turning it onto a cake plate. But while the cake is still warm, we are gonna add a glaze. I told you there was more goodness coming. So in a bowl, I have confectioner's sugar, and to this, I'm adding milk and I'm adding sour cream. And I'm just gonna give this a whisk until it's nice and smooth. And I love the way that this glaze will melt over this warm cake. So just quickly whisk until all of that confectioner's sugar is combined and we have a nice smooth glaze. And then we're gonna spoon it over the cake. Hummingbird cake needs a sweet icing, and we're gonna get it just here with this sour cream glaze. Looks perfect. And with a spoon, you can just come in and start adding this glaze to the top of the cake. Look at that. I wish y'all could smell this, and I'm even more excited for me to cut into this cake and enjoy a slice. Get all the glaze though. Don't want to leave any behind. This is the beauty and the decadence of Hummingbird cake in a coffee cake form. Are you ready for some good news, bold bakers? We don't even have to wait for this to cool completely to enjoy it. So let's have a slice. When you see that layer of streusel on the inside, and these pecans, and the glaze, you'll see how we do not want to wait to get in here and take a bite. Look at that. Look at that. Like I said, let's have a bite. Makes you want to dance a little bit, it's so good. I cannot wait for you to bake this. So you fall in love with Hummingbird cake, you learn that this coffee cake can be eaten at all hours of the day, and there's no excuse why you shouldn't. I hope you'll join me over on the Bake From Scratch side of the world in the magazine and cookbooks we have to offer, and of course, all the content online at bakefromscratch.com. And then of course, the recipe for this coffee cake can be found on biggerbolderbaking.com. Gemma and Kevin, thank you for having me. I have had so much fun baking with you and all of our bold bakers. I can't wait to come back and do it again soon.